How's it going, Google debunkers? It is, like 22 degrees in here right now, so I'm gonna make this
fucking blowing clouds
as quick as possible. It is no secret that I am not a big fan of pseudoscience. And while I talk a lot about specific instances of it and why those specific instances are bad, I rarely talk about the kind of big picture, what can be done about it. And how I don't think you need to have, a PhD or a master's in order to be able to identify and debunk pseudoscience yourself. I feel like the modern scientific world has tended towards specialty. And I think a byproduct of this is that most people in the general public feel like they can't actually engage with science. It's something that seems too heady and academic and hard for them to get into. And as a result of science having a hard time connecting with the public, I think that it can drive the public right into the hands of pseudoscience. Now, science communication is obviously a topic I'm very passionate about, and I was asked to give a lecture at the University of Maine talking about exactly this. And since I haven't dove into it in its own video yet, I thought that this would be an important lesson and perhaps an inspiration for all of you. So what follows are some of my opinions on some of the problems with academia, as well as the crucial role that myself and all of you can play in fighting pseudoscience as a generalist, where you don't need to have a PhD in something in order to be able to identify and correct misinformation. Now, if you guys are interested in this, I'm also planning on doing some live shows this year. It's all under wraps for now. I'm not spoiling anything. But hopefully I'm going to be doing some more shows like this that are a little bit less academic. I was on stage at university after all, so I'm a little bit less rambunctious. But stay tuned because I might be coming live to a city near you at some point in 2025. Oh, one other thing I wanted to throw in here real quick. My team and I are looking to add a new member. This year we've been really wanting to step up our map editing game. Like get really nice 3D renders and models and use LiDAR and, be able to import it to animation software. And while I have a very talented editorial team, none of us have any experience with ArcGIS and all of the fucking things that you need in order to actually make 3D models out of, LiDAR data. So if you have any experience in this field and are looking to help out on the Milo Rossi team, submit an application. There's a Google form in the description of this video that'll ask more about the specifics of all the technical shit that we're looking for to see if you know any of it. And you'd be working closely with me as well as my animator to help make some of these sites come to life for future videos. Okay, that's enough yapping. We're gonna just get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, and with a big thanks to the University of Maine and Dr. Dan Sandweiss. What was the lecture called again? Fighting pseudoscience with science communication and the power of a generalist.
Howdy, everybody. How's it going?
You feel electric. Yeah.
Well, that's what I like to hear. Wow, that is an awful lot of faces I see out there. I'm normally used to doing all of these, presentations, videos, what have you, talking to myself. So it's a little bit interesting to actually have a live studio audience with us here tonight. I'd like to thank you all for coming out. This is awfully exciting. You guys have all traveled a long way to be here, I would imagine. I don't think all of you are, Maine undergrads. So I appreciate all of you for taking in the effort to make the trek out here from wherever that may be, and coming to join us this evening. Anyway, I think we'll just kind of kick things off. My name is Milo Rossi. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about pseudo-archaeology and science communication, my experience with science communication, and how important it is to use social media as an educational tool. I want to give another little disclaimer here because I hear this one a lot. Milo, you're just raining on people's parade. What? Come on, can't you just let people have their fun? Absolutely. I want to preface by saying that there is nothing wrong with finding these theories interesting. They absolutely are interesting. Science fiction is supposed to be interesting. But the problem with these theories is not, the problem that I have with these theories is not the people that believe them, the audiences that find them interesting, or the people that kind of end up getting pulled into it. It's those that will perpetuate these theories, which I believe to be highly irresponsible. And so when I talk about these theories, it's never to try and come down on those that are actually interested in them, or found them thought-provoking, or make people feel stupid for having fallen for it or something like that. These theories are, at the end of the day, made to be fallen for. So there's nothing wrong with kind of being, falling into that. And there's nothing wrong with knowing that they are incorrect and still engaging with them. After all, they are entertaining pieces of media. So again, when I talk about these things, this is mostly directed to those that are actually responsible for platforming this and continuing to share it with their broad audiences. Why are these ideas so popular? I thought about this a lot as I began to see more of these ideas crop up on social media, is what is it about them that actually connects with an audience? Because clearly there were millions of people that were engaging with these topics. There's a couple of reasons. The first one, they are very flashy. Which one of these looks more exciting? I'm not going to be insulted. This is one of the papers on the excavation of Göbekli Tepe by Klaus Schmidt, who was one of the first archaeologists to work on the site. And this is a YouTube short talking about how there were fallen angels at Göbekli Tepe using AI-generated imagery. You are not foolish to think that this one looks a lot more engaging, and it absolutely is. It speaks for itself. It has 3.7 million views. So because of that, people are a lot more likely to engage with these things because nobody wants to read that, and I don't blame them. I don't think that it is something for the layperson to have to do to go out of their way to research a bunch of scientific papers. It's the job of science communicators to be able to bridge the gap between complicated science and the general public. And so if this is the closest they could get to actual science, that is going to be the thing that they listen to. The second is that these theories are really accessible. They're absolutely everywhere. It is an unfortunate reality that these theories are easier to come across than real science. There is a lot more of these out there, and so people are going to stumble across it more than they're actually going to stumble across real science. If you wanted to find the paper, the Klaus Schmidt that I put back up there again, you would have to go out of your way to find it. You'd have to research it, you'd have to be interested in it, and you'd have to sit down and read a dense academic paper. That is not something the layman has the time or motivation to do, and again, I do not blame them. However, I definitely do have the time to put on a almost 3-hour video of Graham Hancock talking to Joe Rogan while I drive my car. So you can't blame people for kind of being more interested in that. Furthermore, many of these topics are geared towards an audience with no prior experience in the field. They are not geared towards scientists, and they know that, and that's great. They should be connecting with the general audience, but again, they are carrying misinformation, and so a general audience doesn't actually have the tools required in order to know that what they are hearing is misinformation. And because of this, it preys on people who may have a lack of media literacy. When you see someone talking about something and they have, millions of viewers or listeners or subscribers or a Netflix deal, it makes it very compelling, and it makes it a lot more believable, because you're like, this person wouldn't have got to this point unless what they are saying has some level of factuality. And so you end up with this kind of, blind leading the blind situation where it kind of ends up being, people climbing on each other's shoulders, and the bigger you get, the more trustworthy you are, even if there's actually nothing below it. And the last reason is that these ideas are really simple. This ties into the fact that these ideas are made to engage with a mainstream audience who have no experience in this field. And I don't want that to sound like an insult that these ideas are somehow more believable because they're simple. They are, this is part of the intent of it. And this is why they do become so believable. Because if you're trying to, convey something like this to an audience, it is a lot easier to boil out a lot of the archaeological nuance to these topics in order to just get that nice soundbite that people can walk away feeling like they know the capital T truth. Okay, so what's the problem? Yeah, I had fun with that one too. I know, it's a good one. So what's the problem with this? This is another question that I see all the time. Quickly following the question of people being like, oh, Milo, why you gotta be such a buzzkill? It is, what's wrong with this? What really is the problem with people thinking, whatever that is? And honestly, I'm gonna be totally real, that's a very fair question. Obviously, a whole conversation that we could kind of spur off to here will be talking about how these theories can have roots in racism, how it is easy for even those that are trying to responsibly talk about these theories to have their theories then used by racists to support their pre-existing racist ideologies. So there's obviously that. But I want to talk a little bit more about something else, the real kind of grander issue that I see with these pseudo-archaeological theories. This isn't about the pyramids. This isn't about giants. This is about what is true and what is false. It is a simple difference between fact and fiction. By perpetuating these theories and by claiming that the big archaeological deep state is out to get you, it is, rather foolishly, still undermining actual science. This is a way of slowly getting the general public to no longer believe the words that are coming out of a scientific body. Again, a scientific body that is not homogeneous. It is an interdisciplinary body. It spans across political borders. This is not a matter of politics. This is a matter of truth and fiction. But these theories begin to undermine and corrode the trust within the scientific process, which can lead to some disastrous results. Okay, so what do we do? You know, this is my little doom and gloom for the first 40 minutes, but now is the fun part. We get to build it all back up again. So now I get to, you know, get all peppy up here, limber up a little, and talk about how we fix the sinking ship. I think there's actually a lot that we can learn from pseudo-archaeology, which sounds a little bit ridiculous after the last lecture that I've been giving, but I actually do think that there are some things that the scientific world and any of us who are interested in fact should actually kind of take away from it. One, people are interested in archaeology. That's pretty nice. I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. Anyone who didn't grow up, well, I don't know a single person who didn't grow up watching Indiana Jones. And because of that, there is a large public desire to learn more about archaeology. But there are currently very few reliable and easily accessible sources for the public to go to actually learn about archaeology. Because of this, pseudo-archaeology is currently outcompeting actual archaeology in the public sphere. There are more people making videos that are more engaging about pseudo-archaeology than there are people making videos about actual archaeology, which is beginning to lead to an oversaturation of the topic, and the general public who are ill-equipped to be able to parse these ideas out from one another, being able to be led right into that pipeline. This also applies to a lot more than just pseudo-archaeology. You can kind of apply this to any branch of science that you're kind of interested in, is that it's important to connect with people who are actually interested in these things. If you are in a field and you have been able to identify a certain topic or something you understand very well that has been kind of bastardized and twisted and turned into a conspiracy theory, you're in a field that people are actually interested in, which is both a good thing and a bad thing when it leads to this. We need to focus on science communication. That's the big takeaway here. I'm going to get into my whole science communication speech now, but this is the single most important thing that we have on our side. It is the ability for science to connect with the public, for science to be able to take what we learn and be able to relay it to those who do not need to make the effort to read our scientific papers. It should not be their job to do that. Social media is the biggest classroom ever created. At the time of me making this video, this is roughly how many views I have on my channel. That is 500 million. And in the grand scheme of things, my channel isn't even really that big when compared to some of the other ones. But in the educational sphere, it is up there. And so this really illustrates the fact that we are able to overcome many of the bottlenecks that traditional education has by using social media. Now don't get me wrong, social media is something that science has been pretty reluctant to kind of adopt, and I almost don't really blame them, because when I think social media, I think like TikTok dances and kids eating like cinnamon and stuff like that. But you could have millions of people watching kids eating cinnamon, so why don't we do something better with it? And this is an example of that. This is, stands to suggest just how far-reaching any topic online can have if it's good enough to engage with an audience. Traditional classroom environments have strong bottlenecks that will limit the amount of people who are actually able to learn from what is going on within them. The largest of these that I think all of us will identify is a financial bottleneck. I think the fact that that there has been sort of a trend towards educational entities being the for-profit businesses is something which is a crime against humanity. I think that it's an absolute travesty that one has to have a certain level of income or revenue or the good grades to get a scholarship to be able to be highly educated. There should never be a bottleneck that will only allow the wealthiest to be able to be educated. That is absolutely terrible. Unfortunately, there is not much that I as an individual can do about that. So I want to give you some ideas of things that we can do otherwise. Firstly, by recognizing the fact that many of us are, any of us who are able to sit in this classroom today or have sat in a classroom before are immensely privileged, we can take what we have learned in these classrooms and take it as our responsibility to share it with the public. It should not be up to every individual to go to university to learn about the things they're interested in. And it should not be up to every individual who didn't get the chance to go to the university to have to sift through pseudoscience based on their own, understanding and judgment calls in order to get actual real information. So, because of this, we have to identify the fact that academia can feel like something that's inaccessible to some people. And I hear a lot, people being like, oh, well, they say academia is an ivory tower, and I don't think it's an ivory tower, but frankly, I don't care what you think. If other people think academia is an ivory tower, it may as well be, because that is going to keep them away from it. So it is our responsibility, no matter what we may think about it, to kick the door down and make it a place that is open for them. Because of this, even if people are feeling like it is, an ivory tower, it will drive them away. So what are we going to do? Are we going to just watch them leave and be like, well, they shouldn't have thought that? Or are we going to make an effort to reach out our hand and bring them into the fold so that they can have the same things that we have learned here? Okay, this is the really big thesis. This is what I've been building to this whole time. I want to talk about the importance of a generalist. So, what is a generalist? A generalist is sort of the jack of all trades, someone who has a wide pool of knowledge that they can pull from multiple buckets. This illustration is a little bit misleading. It kind of illustrates that the specialist knows one thing, which is probably not true, I would imagine, but you guys get the gist. A generalist is someone that has it's kind of like the inch deep, mile wide, while a specialist may have sort of an inch wide, mile deep sort of situation. Again, exaggerating. But this was typically the way that science operated historically. I have lost track of the amount of papers I've delved into, especially from the mid 1800s and kind of like that beginning real brunt of the scientific revolution, where it's written by a guy who was a geologist, an oceanographer, a mountaineer, a paleontologist, a botanist, and an acrobat. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That guy put the resume. Now it's like, yeah, I'm an archaeologist and I study, potsherds from Mesopotamia between 2800 and 2810 BCE. And it's really specific. And now there's a reason for this. Granted, as the scientific revolution has moved forward, and we've learned a lot more about the world around us. And so the importance of a generalist is something which seems like it has sort of fallen by the wayside. As we've learned more, we've cleared off all the topsoil. The only way you can go down, now is down. So it's a lot harder to get through that. And so as we specialize more and more, the only way you can go is into specialty, where there's less of an emphasis put on generalism. However, it is my belief that generalism is more important now than it ever has been. Science needs generalists. Generalists are immensely capable of communicating science to the general public. I think that this is something which, I'm very proud of in what I do, where I have a hard time sort of putting myself into a box of exactly what it is I do, because I have so many interests that I like, so many things that I kind of have that little bit of water in each pail that I can pull from and apply to give the general public an idea of a broad, complex topic without having to go into the nuance of every single little detail. And because of that, generalists can act as an excellent intermediary between the very kind of heady, complex places of science and the general public. I think that it's also unfair for the general public, or for the kind of heady academic area to kind of look down at people who may not be as adept to understanding the things that they process. I said this earlier, and I want to emphasize it again, that it should not be up to the general public to read scientific papers to educate themselves on science. That is ridiculous. It is a skill to even understand scientific papers. I have to take classes on learning about scientific papers. You do not need to do that in order to know, the things that are, the most important to the world. But a generalist can act as an intermediary, where the public doesn't also need to know the level of complex detail going on in, the tower of academia. I think that it's important that, we're surrounded by things today that I just don't even know how they work. I got a phone in I don't have a phone in my pocket now, but I normally have a phone in my pocket. I don't know how it works. I could not tell you the first thing about it, but I'm sure that there is a technological generalist who could, have a look at all the things he's been keeping up with, all the news about how these phones are produced, and he can be like, okay, you don't need to listen to the multiple years of work that has been going on in this, but I can tell you in 3 minutes roughly how your phone works. And I'd be like, oh, that's kind of cool. I don't think it's magic anymore, and I'll put it in my pocket and I'll go about my day. That's great. I don't need to know every single in and out detail. And so that's a really important thing to do, is to be able to bridge that gap, to be able to bring the complexities that are learned in the ivory tower and bring it down and make it something that's accessible for people. In doing this, we allow for the public to get a greater understanding of complex topics. Because as science tends towards specialization, it also begins to isolate itself from the public. That problem we were talking about earlier of the closed doors of academia is exacerbated as people begin to feel like academia is something that they couldn't even understand if they wanted to. Nobody wants to read all of the chemistry papers or the biotechnology papers, but they might be a lot more receptive to someone who's boiling that down and putting it into words that they understand. And if we do not continue to put that emphasis onto generalists who are able to kind of translate and act as that intermediary, it can drive people right towards pseudoscientists, because pseudoscience has no problem in saying whatever they want, and if those are the only people speaking in those fields, those are the things that people are going to listen to. Here's big takeaway. Don't underestimate any of your powers as a generalist. How many of you here tonight are undergrads? Wow, okay, excellent. Then this is going to be potent. My undergrad friends in the audience tonight, I was sitting exactly where all of you were sitting just 2 years ago, which is terrifying. When I was sitting where you are sitting right now, I had no idea what I was doing with my life, and I thought no matter what I chose to do, I was going to be underqualified for it. Especially when I found myself doing social media and having a large amount of people listening to me. I was plagued with the insecurity that I was not qualified enough for people to listen to me. Now, I've largely worked past this imposter syndrome in the time since I graduated, and in my years kind of working in this and seeing the level of acceptance that has been sort of given by the archaeological community and the science communication community as a whole. But I want to speak to all of you to let you know that when you graduate from this university, no matter what your major is in, you will have a deeper level of understanding in many of these topics, in any of these topics, than most of the general public will. Even with a bachelor's degree, or even if you don't even complete it, you will have a much greater understanding of topics that are something that most people don't fully understand. And that puts you at a perfect opportunity to be a generalist. Someone who can take whatever level of education you have and communicate complex things to those who have not had the opportunity to even sit in one of these classrooms. And that's something that I think is really important. Again, I'm working currently in a field where I was told that there is no reason to even do it because no one will take me seriously unless I have a PhD. And I am standing here right now. So believe me when I say that there is an immense amount of need for people with the skill set of a generalist, people who are interested in a wide variety of different things. I want to open this up to those who are not undergrads, to the rest of the audience here tonight, and say that the same thing applies for all of you. All of you have been able to compile interests and things that you love. All of you have been able to interpret information that you have been presented with, which puts all of you in the exact same position of you can communicate these topics to the general public. And this could be anything. I'm using obviously the lens of archaeology and natural sciences, but things like medicine, things like history, things like biology, different parts of technology. I use the example of a phone and how that works. All of you are a specialist in something. And the difficulty is most people are never going to go through the same level to learn about a certain specialty as you already have, which puts you at the perfect position to be that link, to create that bridge between the ivory tower of academia and the public who is the one who actually needs to learn from it. I have a few final notes here that I want to give. One, stand up for scientific fact. It is more important now than ever. This is something which all of us have seen ourselves. It is something I recognize constantly with my work, and all of us need to be united in standing against pseudoscience and misinformation. Second, open the doors to people who feel shut out. If there are people who are tending towards pseudoscience, make them feel as though science is not something that has closed their doors to them. That's why I began this presentation by talking about how I have nothing against people who listen to these theories and who find them interesting. It's those that perpetuate them and to prey on people who don't know any better that I have a problem with. So be that person who can open the door to someone who may not have the same level of understanding that you do. Thirdly, don't undersell your qualifications. This one goes especially out to the undergrads out there. Whatever grade you are in right now, whether you are a freshman or a senior, you probably have a greater understanding of whatever your discipline is than most people do. And that puts you in the perfect position to be able to help educate them as well. And last, gonna go a little cheesy with you guys here. You can make a difference. I heard this one a lot, I really did. And this is one of those things where it's like, just believe in yourself. And you hear it all the time, you're like, shut up. But I really do mean this, I really do. I think that there is, no one should undervalue the impact you can make as a single individual. A brief example I will give. Earlier this year, I got an email from an archaeology professor. And he was like, Milo, love what you do, it's great. I gotta tell you, my incoming class of freshmen, half of them are taking this class because they watched your videos. That absolutely blew my mind. So even though I may be a generalist, and even though I am someone who is dedicated probably to continuing down the path of science communication, and I don't know if I'll ever go for my PhD or go for my master's, I very well may have filled a classroom with people who will go for theirs. And that's the important thing. You can make this domino effect. You can help turn the tide against the wave of anti-intellectualism and against science. Each one of you has it in you, and I know it very well because I did it myself.
What would you say to people who want to make a difference but are just overwhelmed with other work? They have technological issues, they're not as capable as other people. What would you say to them?
That's a really good question. Making a difference does not necessarily have to be something that is tangible in a numerical sense. That was actually I'm glad you brought that up because that's actually a slide I thought about including in this presentation. Because I'm coming at this from an angle of a large science communication platform, it's easy for me to kind of make it sound like the only way you can make a difference is big number. That's not the case. I think that it is something that can be done as simple as in your day-to-day life. Again, the simple fact that you actually want to make a difference means that in any interaction you have, you're going to be putting your best foot forward to actually make that difference. Now, granted, you probably won't be hearing a lot of people just coming up to you and being like, boom, pseudo-archaeology. So maybe it's a little bit different there. But I think that that's kind of why I started this presentation by talking about how it's our responsibility to fight against the powers that be, to fight against the history of colonialism, to fight against pseudoscience, to fight against all of this stuff. That's something that can be done on an individual level, and find places where those injustices are being perpetrated, and find a way, whether it be through donation or simply just sharing it on social media and things like that, to be able to just make an active difference instead of just having your beliefs and not communicating them with the world.
Thank you.
You got it.
So what your thoughts are on science communication being mostly for kids, like Bill Nye the Science Guy, and then how we can get adults more involved in science communication?
Wow, that's also a really good question. I think that having science communication available for kids is obviously really important by giving them, sort of a broad slate to begin with. But that's something that's kind of already being done. I mean, our public education system is kind of made to give a lot of these different pockets, and then you go on to specialize in Babylonian pottery. But I think that there should be a lot heavier emphasis on engaging with an older audience. I think that the difficulty is it's been just really hard to find a platform to do it on, which I think is where social media comes in. Because a young audience, they'll sit in front of the TV. You can put something on to entertain them, and it's great for the parents if it's not cartoons and it's something that's actually kind of educational. Or they're in school where they're kind of getting a generalist, curriculum covering multiple different topics. But once you're an adult, you're kind of, already on the path to specialization, no matter what that is. Even if it's not in academia and you're working, like a manual job or something like that, you're still kind of on the path to specialty. And so it's a lot harder to find a way into the time that those people have. Are you expected to sit there and read a newspaper, or read a book, or something like that? But now with social media, you can kind of take whatever it is that you want and just kind of shove it in front of people's faces, which is an amazing way to engage with adults. I'm not the only one. I'm going to make everyone's professor lose their minds, and I'm going to tell all of you to take your phones out for a second, take a picture of this. These are some of my colleagues doing archaeological videos online as well. I am far from the only person who is making a difference out there, and I want these to stand to suggest that all of you have the ability to do this as well. These accounts all have a wide variety of topics that they cover, of subscriber counts, and of production values, but all of them are excellent. I can vouch for every single one of them, and I highly recommend that you check them all out. Then we have a few more. If you want to go through this as well, you can. These are just some personal favorites of mine. This is showing, I know I talk a lot about archaeology here, and I just did, but this is something which is just some of my personal favorite accounts talk about history, and there's a lot of geology up there, 3 geology, and things like that. So this is showing that whatever your niche may be, there is going to be a place for it. Thank you all very much again. My name is
Wow. That guy sure can yap. That was a really boiled down version of that lecture. I'm pretty sure I talked for like 90 minutes. So to however many 100 people were sitting there and just sat listening to me yap, thanks for your patience. I'd like to thank you all very much for watching this video. We will be returning to our regularly scheduled programming, probably with the next one. We have some site videos coming up that we're working on, but I have been in the capital T fucking trenches working on Ancient Apocalypse Season 2. So it will be coming down the pipeline. I will be putting my first reaction watch-throughs on Patreon, so if you're interested in seeing those are available for Patreon. Links to that in the description of the video. It's really fucking cold here. I've literally been standing here for maybe like 10 minutes to film this piece, and like my fingers are turning, I don't even know what color that is. Blue, green, white, who cares? There's a cat meowing outside the door too, but he does not want to be in here, I can guarantee you that. Again, I'd like to give a huge thank you to Dr. Dan Sandweiss and the University of Maine for hosting me at the Collins Center for the Arts. It was a dream come true to be able to speak on stage at my alma mater. That is something I never dreamed would be able to happen, and I'm thrilled to have been able to have the opportunity. Being able to be on stage and do what I do in front of a bunch of people was probably the most fun I've had all year, and so I have the itch to do actual like live shows with like tickets and drinks and me getting up there and just doing this. So keep an eye out, because hopefully there'll be some of those coming down the pipeline this year. But anyway, I'd like to thank my patrons for making what we do here possible. Patrons get early ad-free access to all of my videos. All of your names will be in the credits of the videos. A small token of my appreciation and links to that are in the description. Remember to stay curious, stay inquisitive, and most importantly, I am going to go back into the house because it is so fucking cold in this room, I think I'm going to die.